Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Sean from Safe Seats Ottawa joins us today to talk all about infant car seats. She wants to give parents and caregivers exactly what she was desperate to find when she had her two boys. After having her first child, she quickly realized how challenging it was to find hands on help when it came to car seats. So she became the expert she needed. She joins us today and talks all about how to choose the right car seat for you, what the differences are between car seats and when one might be better than the other. And she reviews the common issues that come up in terms of not using car seats safely. Really excited to talk to Sean right after this quick reminder.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are doctors Sarah and Alicia, maternity physicians and moms who have been through it all. We want to empower you with knowledge so you can have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience you can.
She Found Health and She Found Motherhood is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This information does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Health and She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any of the institutions with which we are affiliated. Some of our podcast episodes are sponsored so that we can keep getting great info out there to you, our listeners. We only partner with companies that we truly believe in. Some of our links and suggestions may be affiliates, and we would appreciate you using them to help fund this important work. Now let's get to it. Sean, thank you so much for joining me today. I remember with my son, my eldest, about 9 years ago, trying to figure out what car seat to buy, how to buy, where to get it from. Can I get one from a friend? Do I need to buy new? How do I install it? There's just so much you need to know about car seats. And then we had a different car at that point, and we were thinking about buying a new one. I didn't know if that was applicable, and it was just such a challenge. And I had no idea that people like you existed in the world. And if I had, I would have jumped at the opportunity to have a discussion with you. So thank you so much for joining us today to talk about car seats in newborns. I don't know if you want to start off just telling us a little bit about yourself and what got you into this area of interest.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. My story's very similar to yours and probably most parents. I had my first child 10 years ago and I felt the exact same way, completely overwhelmed, had no idea what to do. And I was genuinely assuming that by the time I got to the hospital and had a baby, that surely someone there was going to show me what to do and help guide me out of the hospital. In my mind, I'm thinking they show you how to bathe your baby. So clearly they're going to show you how to transport your baby safely. And I was really shocked to that was not the case and that we were just handed a human and said, congratulations, and we're on our way. And it was a lot to take in. And I sourced out as much information as I could ahead of time, but it was hard to find information. It was really hard to streamline the information into what was correct, applicable, and what was Canadian, as I found that to be a challenge. A lot of American information out there that's pretty different from how we do things here, as I've learned. And so I was trying very hard to figure it out. And then ultimately, when I had my second, I just decided, okay, things are progressing, but nothing seems to be available still, even 4.5 years later. And I just ultimately decided, well, then I think it's time that I become the expert that I was looking for. And I became certified as a technician. And then after that, I just enjoyed it. I was able to work with parents and really help parents feel a little bit less stressed in what is a very stressful journey. And then I ultimately decided to become an instructor so that I could help train new technicians and really just to further my own experience, my own education. I just enjoyed the process. And I slowly also developed more services that I was able to offer by working with parents and seeing where there was a void in the marketplace in the area. And then also throughout the country of where I might be able to help serve parents in my community and elsewhere by just making things a little bit easier for them.
Awesome. Thank you. So, why don't we start off about why do we care? Let's talk about why we use car seats. And I think we all know this, but let's just review kind of the information around why do we use car seats in the first place?
Yeah, no, and it's a great question because I think we've all seen as parents now, we look back and we see how things were really different. And so sometimes it is hard to wrap your head around. I survived why I was sitting on my parents' lap and driving the Land Cruiser down the highway. I remember doing that as a child. And so surely it can't be as much of a big deal as we're making it out to be. But as the years have progressed, so too have the number of cars on the street. Cars are driving faster. There's more of them, and we are more educated now. When you know better, you do better. And so we now know that motor vehicle collisions are the leading cause of preventable death in children ages 1 through 9 in Canada. Basically, driving is the most dangerous thing that we do, and most of us do it on a daily basis with our children in the mix. And so, car seat safety is very important because when you're on the road, a lot of what's going to happen to you is unpredictable and unavoidable and uncontrollable. And I think for a lot of us, we want to feel in control as much as we can. And car seat safety is one of those areas where we truly can control everything about it. We can set ourselves up to be in the right position so that for all of those uncontrollable situations, if they were to arise, we've done everything to set ourselves up so that we end up in the best place possible. And for me, control is a big thing. I like to be able to control as much as I can. That's just part of my personality. And car seat safety is just, it's progressing. We're learning so much more. And we just need to give these little ones a chance. And we talk a lot about the day to day risks, but I think a lot of times we don't realize how dangerous driving truly is, and that we need to start small and start in your car, which will allow you to keep them safe as long as you possibly can in a controlled way.
Yeah, and you sent me some stats on the reduction of fatal or deadly injuries using safety seats, right? So 71% reduction for infants under a year and about 50-ish
Yeah.
plus or minus for kids 1 to 8 years old if you're actually using safety seats.
Yes. Yeah. The numbers are really staggering. And what we also know is that from clinics, from public health clinics, from surveys that we've done over the years, that approximately 90% of car seats are either installed or being used improperly. And so when we know that these car seats have such a huge impact on keeping our children safe, and then seeing those incredible statistics showing how much of our car seat knowledge is maybe not quite on par with where it needs to be as a whole, it's really something that we need to work towards, and work on educating parents so that they can feel a little bit more confident in their day-to-day life. I know a big part of what I discover is that there's a lot of shame and a lot of concern for being shamed in the parenting community. We worry that if we reach out for help, it's a sign of weakness, and it really should be a sign of strength. It's hard to put it into perspective sometimes. We're very eager to, if we have aches and pains, we go to find the doctor that we need to find. We find that expert who's going to help us. And for some reason, we are nervous doing that when it comes to car seats. And car seats are life saving devices. And because they come out of the car and they attach to strollers and they are used in everyday life, I think sometimes we simplify what they actually do overall. And we don't really realize that it's not as simple as just putting it in the car and you should be able to do it. It's not always that simple. And I always tell parents a car seat is a life saving device, but it can only protect your child if it's used properly every single time.
And it's a bit disturbing to me that it's so hard to use it properly. 90% is a huge number of people who are incorrectly using their
Yeah.
car seat. And I have no doubt I was in that number. Yeah, that's wild. So I'm glad people like you exist to help
Yeah.
support us until the regulations get with it and make things easier to use properly.
Yeah. You're completely right. They are huge numbers, and it is very concerning to see, but you're completely right as well that it's a bit frustrating that they are as difficult to use as they are. Thankfully, it's starting to get a little bit easier. So I think other than just having more people in that field that are able to help us, I think manufacturers are also starting to realize that It's time to really try to break things down for parents. And we hear a lot of times like, it's just a car seat. It's not rocket science. No, it's not. But sometimes I think some of us think that maybe rocket science would be easier than trying to get that car seat in the vehicle. So, yes, hopefully it'll continue the trend of making them a little bit more parent and user friendly.
Totally. So why don't we venture on to what car seat should I buy? I remember being on mom's forums and saying, what should I get? And there everybody had a different opinion and a different answer as to what's the best car seat out there. So do you mind giving us a little bit of advice around how to choose a car seat?
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, there's no simple answer with that. There's no one size fits all car seat. There's no one size fits all family, right? Everyone has different needs, different cars. And so, really, what we focus on when we're helping parents navigate choosing the right car seat is it needs to be the right car seat for you. So, it needs to fit your lifestyle, your budget, your vehicle, and your child properly. And I know I think sometimes that seems a bit like a bit of a kind of glossed over answer, but it really is true. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for you. Children come in all shapes and sizes, just like adults. And so there truly isn't a one size fits all solution for everybody. What I really work on with parents is getting them to break down what their needs are first. And so if they have very specific needs, which a lot of parents do, including sometimes having that dreaded side by side installation that parents worry about, or multiple children filling every seating position. That can be a very specific situation. And then for me, I really try to get them to focus on what their budget truly is. Because I think as a society, I know myself, I really grew up being taught that cost and quality go hand in hand. And in the world of car seats, it's not always the case. So just because a car seat is more expensive. And when I say expensive, we can go anywhere from you could spend $100 on a car seat, you can spend up $700 on a car seat. And it doesn't always mean that most expensive car seat is that much is the top of the line in terms of safety. It doesn't mean that it's the right fit for you. We have some really expensive car seats on the market that aren't necessarily a great fit in certain vehicles. And so for me, I don't want parents to feel that they are restricting safety because maybe their budget isn't an open ended budget, just because they can't necessarily afford to spend $700 on a car seat, which, let's be real, that's a huge amount of money when it comes to a child and any type of device like that. It's a lot of money. And it doesn't have to be $700 that you put down. It doesn't sometimes even have to be $300 that you put down. Sometimes the best seat for you is the seat that is $100. And there shouldn't be any shame in that being what's an acceptable budget for you. And so I think in what I do, I really try to focus parents on figuring out what their needs are first. And then we'll find the best seat for them and work through things that way. Because I don't like that pressure of feeling like they have to spend a certain amount in order to protect their children. And I know for myself, I bought the most expensive car seat on the market. When I had my first, I quite literally bought the most expensive car seat I could find. And I was adamant that it's expensive, it's got to be the best. And I can tell you that it was not the last car seat I purchased. In fact, it was just one of many. And looking back, I wish that I had not focused so much on cost and focused more on what the seat was giving to me and how the seat was going to function in my day to day life rather than thinking that the price tag was going to be indicative of getting the right seat for me. So for me, I really try to focus on lifestyle and what the parents' needs are first. And I think that also helps keep some of those used seats from being purchased because I think there's a lot of parents who would sadly rather buy a used car seat off of Kijiji, Craigslist, rather than spend the money that they have in their budget to get a seat of quote unquote lesser value off the shelf new. And that's something that I really want to work towards fixing essentially.
Yeah, and we are not supposed to be using used car seats, correct?
Yeah, there's a little gray area in that. So I always tell parents that if you are going to get a used car seat, you want it to be from a trusted source. So you want that person to be someone that you would trust with the life and the safety of your child, because that is essentially what you're doing. And I can tell you, I made all the mistakes for my first. Every single one of the things that I tell parents not to do or to avoid, I did every single one of them. We bought our car seat off of Kijiji from basically a stranger. And I bought it because I had read that brand was a really great brand. And I had no clue that a car seat was not something that you should thrift. I was thrifting everything else because I was very much still am into that kind of process. And I just assume if I can purchase everything else for my child secondhand, why not get a pre-loved car seat? And looking back now, it's, oh my gosh, of course, now it makes so much sense why I shouldn't have done that. But at the time, I didn't know. And I now, that's not to say that getting a car seat from a trusted source, from a friend, from a sister, from someone that you care about and that you are comfortable knowing that you have the same views on how it's been washed and that you can really trust them with the safety of your child, that's a different story. And I actually encourage that if you're able to pass your seat on to someone after you're finished with it, fantastic. Keep it out of the landfill. We don't have a lot of recycling options in the country at this time for car seats. So everywhere we can pass them along and reuse them is excellent, but it just needs to be from, like I said, someone that you would trust the life and safety of your child with, because that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And if your car seat has been in a car accident, it is no longer safe. So that's where I was coming from. So exactly, you're right. If the person who's gifting it to you or selling it to you, and you know that they would be honest with you if your car was in a car accident or that seat had been damaged in some way, then 100%. But if you do not know that person or
Yeah.
you don't know the history of that car seat, then please, please do not do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're completely right.
Yeah. And the other thing we mentioned a couple times, but other things you really need to take into consideration is what kind of car do you have? Because certain car seats do not fit rear facing in certain cars. And also, what kind of strength do you have? Because let me tell you, you are going to be lugging that thing with your child everywhere. And so sometimes the lighter car seat is going to be better for you and your family because it's not going to cause you injuries if you don't necessarily have the most upper body strength, or the ergonomics or the way that you can carry a car seat is also really important. So those are a few other things just to take into account when you're purchasing or when you're looking at car seats. So when should people start thinking about car seats? What do you usually advise if you were like a fairy godmother and you could tell people when to start looking? What would you suggest to them?
So the sooner the better. If you can, when baby's on the way, that should be a good starting point and starting to line up your options, at least reaching out, doing the research. I always encourage parents to do preliminary research on their own because they're going to be able to get some of that information on their own, figure things out, and just maybe even narrow things down a little bit. And especially if you have a particular stroller system that you're working with, your stroller, if we're talking about infant seats, your stroller, you're going to be using that stroller for years. The infant seat is a very small piece of the puzzle in terms of longevity and amount of use. So you're going to be using that infant seat for approximately a year, but that stroller is going to be used much longer. So maybe look towards the stroller system first and then narrow down your options from there. Unless you have a really specific situation where you know that you don't have all the options in the world, maybe that isn't the best step to take. But the sooner the better so that you can start planning. From there, I really encourage parents to reach out to a child passenger safety expert, a technician, someone in their community who can maybe help answer some of the specifics about how that seat will sit in their car. Because as you said, not all car seats fit all cars. They're not created equal. And some car seats will appear to be very compact on the shelf in the store. And then you put it in your car, and that thing is huge. And you might not be able to use the seat in front of it. And unfortunately, lots of parents that I meet that are driving around in the back seat of their car thinking that they're never going to be able to use the front seat again because their infant seat, for example, was so big that they weren't able to use their front seat comfortably or safely. And they're shocked to learn that there are other options that in fact will open up their car for more use and allow them to sit back up front like an adult again. So trying to work with an expert in the field. Sometimes your retailer will have someone there who can help you, but most of the time, be cautious about how much information you rely on getting from the retailer themselves, because a lot of times these big box stores, they get a little information about a lot of things. And so for them to be an expert on every single thing in their section, it's really not a reasonable assumption. And unfortunately, they will sometimes just not have the answers to your specific questions. So they're definitely a good resource, but we like parents to get resources from a bunch of different places so that they're able to get all of the correct information. And then in terms of installation in the car, I would say anywhere around the 34-week mark is a good time to start getting that car seat prepared in the vehicle, because babies come when they're good and ready.
You never know.
Sometimes that is that. Exactly. Sometimes that is 35 weeks and sometimes that is 42. So it really depends on your situation, but sooner is always better so that you're not rushed and feeling stressed, and you can get it all set up. And then that way you also have a nice amount of time to practice with the seat as well. So meeting with someone who can help go over the seat with you, help with the installation, but also help with the in and out daily use of the seat, and then give you something that you can practice before baby arrives so that you're able to really get comfortable with that seat and it's not the first time you use it. We did that with our second, believe it or not. It was so we picked that seat up the day we brought that baby home from the NICU. So it was a very last minute purchase and decision. And I highly regret doing it that way, and would encourage parents not to do it that way if they have any ability in any way to prevent it.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about the different kind of types of car seat, infant seat versus a convertible seat. And in terms of an infant seat, those with a base and those without. Do you mind doing a little bit of a breakdown of pros and cons and why you might choose one over another?
Absolutely. So there are two main types of car seats that will accommodate a newborn: an infant seat, which is often referred to as a bucket seat, that comes either with or without a base now, and a convertible seat or multi-mode seat. And a convertible slash multi-mode seat, they are the car seats that are installed in the vehicle and that remain in the vehicle. And they will have multiple modes that you can use them for. Whereas an infant seat is only going to rear face in your vehicle, and it's one that is able to be taken in and out of the vehicle with its use of its convenience base. Both types of car seats are great options for parents. So a lot of misunderstandings happen from thinking that you need to have an infant seat in order to bring a baby home from hospital, birthing center, or just in for daily use. And the truth is you don't. You can use a convertible seat from birth so long as it's the right convertible seat and you're able to get a good fit on that newborn. But not everybody is aware of that. And sometimes thinking that you need to have an infant seat is a requirement of leaving the hospital. Not true. I always tell parents that baby's yours. You can take that baby home. And sometimes parents don't drive. Sometimes parents walk to the hospital. So there is no legal requirement of leaving the hospital with a car seat. There may be a hospital policy about that, but there's no legal requirement. There's a legal requirement that you have a car seat to be in a car with a child, but not to leave the hospital. And so oftentimes for some parents, having a convertible seat is what's best for them, for their newborn. The biggest difference between the two in terms of fit to child are that infant seats are truly designed more with infants in mind. So oftentimes you will get a better fit for smaller babies in an infant seat versus the fit that you would get in a convertible or multi-mode seat. So sometimes there is a reason to go with an infant seat other than just the convenience option. And they are very convenient. So don't get me wrong. I use them for both of my kids and would do it again in a heartbeat, but it isn't always the best situation or the necessity for every family. And the fit is really what's ideal. So that goes back to, again, just making sure that you're getting the right seat for your family, for your child, for your car. And then the big difference between having an infant seat with a base and one without, most infant seats on the market nowadays have a base that come with it. There is currently one that does not come with an actual base. And that is a newer trend. But car seats, for the most part, infant seats can be installed either with or without the base. Not all. I always say that car seats are a lot like French verbs for anyone that speaks French. There's the rules and then there's the exceptions. And sometimes the exceptions are greater than the rules. And car seats definitely fall into that category. So, with your infant seats, the vast majority of them out there can be installed with or without the base. And then there are like that one that happens to come without a base. And sometimes having a car seat that doesn't have a base or not using that base is actually a better fit for parents who maybe don't have a car that they own. Maybe they do ride share or car share programs, or they Uber a lot of places. And so they need the car seat for their child, but they don't necessarily need to install the base. And so sometimes that's a better fit for them. And thankfully, manufacturers now are starting to acknowledge that there are all sorts of different types of families with different needs. And that's where the different car seats fall into to basically that work better for different families. So whatever works best for you is really what it's going to come down to. And sometimes that's an infant seat. Sometimes that is a convertible seat from birth. It really depends.
I am going to say one thing though, because I got the convertible seat for my first and quickly
Yeah,
thereafter went and got a good old bucket seat because those babies sleep a lot and they sleep a lot when you're
me too.
driving. And it's really a shame to
Mhm.
wake them up from their little nap when you're having to get them out of their car seat rather than just picking up the bucket and bringing it in. Now, you should never leave a child unattended in a car seat sleeping, whether or not they're in a bucket or a convertible. However, if you're there, you put them on the counter and do your thing while they're having their nap, and you don't have to wake them up. So that is my little piece of advice to all of you out there. Hey, Sarah,
Yes, Alicia.
did you have any problems with newborn sleep?
Oh my gosh, I sure did, especially with my first.
Me too. I wish I'd known more about what to expect going into it.
I know, and I wish that I had known to create a sleep plan with my partner.
I know. How can you support each other to get the sleep that you need while supporting your little baby?
Totally.
So guess what, guys? That's why we created the Newborn Sleep 101 course. In this course, we discuss what does newborn sleep look like and how can we help support that sweet little baby to become the best sleeper they can.
While also supporting you and your partner as you navigate this complex, sleep-deprived time.
We talk about how to set up your nursery or your bedroom to optimize both your sleep and your newborn sleep. And we also start talking about how you can start implementing routines and schedules into your day and your newborn so that by the time they're 3 or 4 months, it's well established. Because guess what? That's when they start to really need it.
If you're interested in learning more, head to our website, www.shefoundhelp.com/courses.
We hope that you get better sleep than we did. Why don't we go on to, I'm sure I will have, why don't you let us know a little bit about why are we doing rear facing? So for children more than under the age of 1, but for the purpose of this podcast, we're talking about those infant car seats. So tell our listeners why children must be rear facing.
So you're completely right. Car seats, rear facing as we know it, is the safest way for children to travel. Truly, it's the safest way for anybody to travel in a vehicle. Unfortunately, as a driver, it's a little hard to drive when you're rear facing. So that's out of the equation. But it definitely is the safest way to travel. And part of the reason for that is the basically how the seat is going to move and how your child's going to move within the seat. So when we're dealing with our little ones, so newborn, small infants, just small babies in general, they are very much underdeveloped in terms of their muscular strength and their skeletal strength. And we have babies who are born with disproportionately large heads and very weak or almost non existent neck muscles. And so we need to protect those little bodies until they're capable of protecting themselves a little bit better in terms of protecting their airway, but also for their bodies to be stronger so that they're better equipped to withstand the forces that come in a forward facing position in a car. And so when you're rear facing, the beauty of rear facing is that it really acts as a cocoon around your child. That seat is designed to rotate downwards and absorb the initial impact, and then cocooning your child move throughout the entire phase of the crash so that your child is essentially just along for the ride within the seat. The seat is absorbing all of the impact so that your child doesn't have to. It I like to compare it to turtle in a turtle shell. So the turtle shell is your car seat, and that shell is designed to protect your baby. And if you are not able to have that shell around you, you're definitely going to have much greater forces on the body. And the baby, in general, small children, they just are not capable of withstanding those crash forces. So we now focus on rear facing as long as possible. We used to talk a lot about that kind of that magic age of 2. And we're really trying to steer parents away from an age milestone as and more towards development. So we know that the spine develops with age and it has nothing to do with the size of the child. So a 2-year-old that's the size of a 4-year-old still has the spine of a 2-year-old. Doesn't matter if they look big or even if they are big. We care about that spinal development. And short of you getting a bone scan done on your child and perhaps other types of testing that you can do, you're not going to know at what stage your child's spine is developing. When they're born, they have a lot of big open spaces and a lot of cartilage that makes up the spine. That's why everything stretches so easily. And that's why kids can sleep in those crazy little positions that look incredibly uncomfortable to an adult because they're very bendy, they're very flexible. And that's great for a lot of things, but it's not great for protecting their spine. Until they're about 2, the spine hasn't started developing in turning into bone, the process of ossification. And so that's why we focused initially on that kind of magic number of 2, because we know that's when things start to develop. But we're really trying to steer parents more towards just keeping their children rear facing as long as possible up to the maximums of their seats or limits of their seat. And for most seats on the market, that allows us to keep children rear facing up to 4 years of age, if not older. We now have car seats that will rear face up to 50 pounds and 49 inches, which is fantastic. And it will allow you to keep even heavier, bigger children rear facing as long as possible so that it gives their chin body a chance to really catch up so that they're a lot stronger and able to withstand those forces. I usually tell parents to aim for the age of 3 if they're really focused on a number. And the reason I give 3 as a reference is that through testing, we know that by age of 3, there's about a 50% chance that your child has had ossification of the C3 vertebrae. And the C3 vertebrae is the area of the body that's most commonly injured in a motor vehicle crash. So using that information is one way to help parents understand that that process of ossification is a long one and there's no rush and we don't need to quickly move them through the different stages. Let them be little, let them stay rear facing as long as you can to give them the best chance possible to survive the worst possible situation.
Awesome. I think that's a really important message. So we've gone through a lot of stuff, and I'm going to ask you, you sent me a whole long list of common mistakes people make in terms of using car seats, and we do not have enough time to go through it. It's really quite incredible. So I would like you to choose your top 3 ones that you would like
Okay.
to tell our listeners about.
Okay. So I think the first one is probably what most people would assume, and that's that the car seat is either not installed correctly or not installed securely. So either the installation is too loose, the installation is incorrect, meaning they're using multiple installation methods, which are not permitted by the seat, or even the angle is incorrect. Those ultimately, the car seat is only as good as it is being installed and used properly. And we need it to be installed exactly as the manufacturer states and explains in the manual in order for it to function properly. So it's definitely up there as one of the top ones, and usually a very fixable solution or problem, I should say, as well. I'd say that the second most common or maybe even tied for first, is improper harnessing or the harness being too loose. So either the harness being incorrectly positioned in relation to the child's shoulders. So for rear facing, you always want that harness to be either at or coming from below baby's shoulders so that it can round the shoulders. I tell parents, think backpack. It's going to round your baby's shoulders the way a backpack strap does to keep them down and in the seat. We want the seat to do the moving. We want your child to move very little, if at all, within the seat. And we know that as that seat initially rotates downwards, there's going to be that pull for your child to move upwards in the seat. We need to ensure that they're not moving too far upwards because we know that the more a child moves within a car seat, the greater the chance of injury. So a lot of times parents are very concerned with newborns, especially that we're going to do the harness up too tight. And while it is physically possible to do the harness up too tight, it's very unlikely that you will do the harness up too tight. Far more likely that you'll do the harness up too loose and allow too much movement for the child. So I always explain to parents that the harnessing is as important as the installation. In fact, if you're going to be dealing with an infant seat that's moving in and out of the car, I'd say the harnessing is perhaps even more important because the harnessing is what's positioning your child correctly in the seat so that the seat can do its job properly. And the harnessing is also for newborns, especially important because it's holding their position so that it protects their airway because babies cannot protect their airway independently. And if the harness is too loose, they're going to slide forward and round out their spine so that they go from a nice straight position into more of a rounded position, which is going to put them in what we refer to as chin to chest position, which increases the risk of positional asphyxiation, a really fancy word for that airway being blocked. So the harness's job is to hold your child in the proper breathing position so that they're safe until such a time, especially that they're able to protect their airway independently. So the harnessing needs to be snug. Chest clip needs to be at armpit height so that the harness can do its job. And the harness needs to be adjusted as your child grows. And oftentimes that gets missed as well. It gets moved up too soon, maybe, or just forgotten about in general. So the harness is definitely an important one. Even if you're just going around the corner, even if you're just going down the street, we know that most collisions happen just around the corner. And so it doesn't matter. Anytime you're in the vehicle, baby needs to be harnessed in as if they were going for a long ride. And then that same goes for the infant car seats. I tell parents, whenever baby's riding in that car seat, even if you're not getting in the car, that harness needs to be done up snug to pass the pinch test as if you were about to get in the vehicle. A good little pro tip that I give some parents as well in terms of like, when should I be adjusting the harness? If they've gone up a shoe size, it's probably time to also check their harness height, especially when they get a little bit older, because sometimes it creeps up on you a little bit. Odds are if they've gone through a growth spurt and they've changed shoe sizes, they probably need to change harness sizes as well.
I love that tip. So we've talked about installing it properly. We've talked about harnessing properly. I'm going to choose the number 3 because I grew up in Ottawa and I know how cold it gets there. And here in Victoria, less of an issue. But a lot of our parents or new parents to be we're coming into a cold weather season and it's really hard to know how to keep them warm in the car while keeping them safe. So I'm going to choose your number 3 as not appropriately dressing your children or not using the proper warm weather gear with your infants in their car seat. And I know you have an amazing blog post on this, and we'll link that below that has all kinds of great tips and great products that are safe. But why don't you go through a little bit about that for us, please?
Yeah. So yes, you're completely right. I think a lot of times we overthink winter a little bit, as especially as first time parents. We worry about kids being too cold in the car seat, and that often leads to us bundling them up. I know with my first, my mom told me that the way to dress your kids is that they should be wearing one layer more than you're wearing. And if I were to do that, my kids would be sweating profusely nonstop. I run cold, my kids run hot. So, not always the case. It's really important that the harness is secured and snug to the body of your child and not to what they're wearing. And unfortunately, in the colder temperatures, it's a little challenging because we worry about them getting cold and we have a tendency to overdress them in the car seat. And this goes through all stages of being in the vehicle. So even for parents and adults as the driver and passenger, we should not be wearing bulky clothing in the car in the winter. We should have the seatbelt or harness needs to always be snug to our body. So in terms of finding a tire that's winter safe and that's going to keep them warm, but also keep them safe in the car seat, it's really important that it's thin, compressible layers. So, ideally, anywhere between 2 to 4 thin, compressible layers is ideal for wearing, dressing your child for the car seat. Things like fleece are excellent, cotton, things that are single layer garments. So, we want to avoid items that have multiple layers built into them because what happens is that air tends to get trapped between the layers. So you're going to end up doing up the harness and in for a good analogy that I like to use, or I guess a visual is if you take a plastic bag and you fill that with air and you push down on it, that air is going to escape slowly from the plastic bag and it's going to trickle out. It's not going to come out right away. If you tie that bag up, it's going to trickle out slowly. And the same thing happens when you put your child in bulky winter gear in the vehicle. That air gets trapped between the layers of their garment. The harness gets tightened and it slowly starts to push out the air. And then it continues to push out the air as you're traveling. So, what will happen is you'll leave the house, the harness will feel snug and secure to your child. But by the time you get to your destination, you're going to find that the harness is completely loose. And that's because more air has escaped as you're driving along. And so, we want parents to really focus on keeping that harness snug to the body. If you're worried about them getting cold, you can put blankets over top of the harness once it's secured. You can get all sorts of great, nice warm blankets. There are now, thankfully, a lot of really fantastic garments and attire in the market that you can find that will keep your child warm, but also is thin enough that it's going to keep them safe. So we've come a long way in the past 10 years. I can tell you it was a lot harder, and you can probably attest to this as well. 10 years ago, it was a lot harder to find winter gear that was thin enough that it passed the car seat safety test. Now we have a lot more options out there. And really simply done, it's just a matter of dressing your child in layers, securing the harness, and then a blanket over top of the harness is the most cost effective and the easiest way to do it so that you're keeping them nice and safe, but also warm.
Amazing advice. Wow, that's a lot. Thank you, Sean, for chatting about all of that. We chatted a little bit about you and why you got into the work that you did. We talked about why we care so much. What are the stats around car seats? How to choose a car seat. And this is when like a child passenger safety technician or a CPST kind of certified person is really helpful around your specific needs, your child's needs, your car needs, perhaps. And then we chatted a little bit about the different types of car seats and your top 3 tips on things that we as parents may not recognize we are doing incorrectly, and why it would also be really helpful, I would imagine, to have a child passenger safety technician kind of do the actual work with you to show you how to do things properly. Where can people find you, Sean, if they want to learn a little bit more? And also, we'll post it all in our notes, but where can they find that amazing blog post you did on kind of winter clothing in children?
Thank you. So safeseatsottawa.com is my website. And on there, there's a blog. It's called The More You Know. And the very first blog post up there is the winter safety one. It has a nice outline in there of exactly how to check to see whether or not what you purchased is in fact winter safe or winter car seat safe. And I also include in there a bunch of links to garments that I have either tried personally with my children, tried out in testing, or that I am comfortable recommending in general. And I do update those links every year. And that's kind of an ongoing process right now, just because manufacturers are slowly still rolling out their winter gear. All of the links in there will be updated as soon as I have all of the updated current information. And any questions, you guys can always reach out as well. I always encourage parents, that list is not exhaustive, obviously. So if there's something that you're unsure about, you can reach out and send a link to me, and I'm happy to take a look and see if that's something that maybe I should include in my list, or if it's something that maybe there's a better option out there that will address your needs, but be a little bit on the safer side as well.
Awesome. And you're in Ottawa, so anybody in Ottawa can touch base with you around in person or virtual/in person outside of Ottawa, can people get a hold of you virtually if they want your advice on car seats, or would you recommend, how would people get a hold of
Yeah,
a...
absolutely. Yeah, so I actually do work with a lot of people outside of the Ottawa area. Virtually, I do virtual consult. And one of the services that I do with a lot of parents across the country is helping them choose the right car seat for them. So that's something that I can do. Even though I'm not necessarily in your car with you, I can absolutely guide you and provide you with a list of my top recommendations for seats that will work for each person. So basically, fill your needs. And then if you're looking for in-person help in somewhere in across the country and you're unsure, you can always go to the Child Passenger Safety Association of Canada website. And I can send you that link as well. And there is, of course, a find a tech link right on that main page there that will allow you to type in your postal code and allow you to kind of track who's near you if you're looking for that in-person support. Now, I know these days virtual is definitely a great option. Sometimes parents still really appreciate the in-person quality.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for an amazing amount of information. You obviously are very passionate about this subject, and you obviously have a huge amount of knowledge within it. So I appreciate you coming on today and chatting with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys having me, and it's been wonderful. So I'm always happy to share. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.